This book is The Years by Annie Ernaux, and I recently read this during a holiday in France, so that added to the enjoyment, I think. Annie Ernaux has been recommended to me by two friends quite recently, and she's a winner of the Booker in 2022, so I thought it was about time I read this and to see if I could find out what all the fuss was about. And I'd like to start off by saying that I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. I was entranced by this book. It was a book I could live in. Annie Ernaux is a similar generation to me, except that she was born at the beginning of the Second World War and in France, whereas I was English and born at just after the end of that war. She comes from a kind of working class, maybe lower middle class family in the north of France. She has the benefit of state education, free state education, and goes to university and becomes a teacher. She's a teacher of literature. And in some ways, her background in that respect, those respects are very similar to mine, except I didn't teach literature. Perhaps I can best introduce it by reading some of the blurb from the back of the book. Considered by many to be the iconic French memoirist's defining work, The Years is a narrative of the period 1941 to 2006. She published it in 2008. Told through the lens of memory, impressions past and present, cultural habits, language, photos, books, songs, radio, television, advertising, and news headlines. Annie Ernaux invents a form that is subjective and impersonal, private and communal, and a new genre, the collective autobiography, in order to capture the passing of time. And I was interested, or intrigued really, about this notion of the collective memoir. And many of the reviewers talk about this aspect. And I wondered what I would make of it, really. And it's a very, very strange style she writes in. She never uses the word I, although it's a memoir. She never talks about I. She often talks about we, and sometimes you don't know who the we is. Sometimes it might be her family, her birth family, or it might be her family with her husband and her children, or it might be women, or it might be French people, or it might be the human race. So this we shifts about. She decides she wants to write a memoir when she's in kind of her early middle age, and she muses on what sort of form this would take. And let me just read a few extracts, because it's very, very interesting the way she makes sense of what it is she's trying to write. So here we go. She says, she would like to assemble these multiple images of herself. So she, not I. So she's talking in she cast herself into the third person here. Multiple images of herself, separate and discordant. Thread them together with the story of her existence, starting with her birth during World War II up until the present day. Therefore, an existence that is singular, but also merged with the movements of a generation. Each time she begins, she meets the same obstacles. How to represent the passage of historical time, the changing of things, ideas and manners, and the private life of this woman. How to make the fresco of 45 years coincide with the search for a self outside of history, the self of suspended moments transformed into the poems she wrote at 20, Solitude, etc. Her main concern is the choice between I and she. There's something too permanent about I, something shrunken and stifling, whereas she is too exterior and remote. You see, there she's really talking about the struggle as a writer and as a memoirist and as somebody who is trying to capture who they are and who they have been. And that thread crops up in the book all along the way. But as it said in there, she's also talking sometimes about world events, not at any great length. She's sometimes talking about French culture. It's all lost on me, the television, the advertisements. I don't know much about anything about French pop songs, all that sort of stuff. But what she's actually saying is a person is made up of these millions of things that individually happen to them. Some are events and images and whatever that have been widely shared within the culture or worldwide, but they're put together, these millions of impressions, including the very individual ones, they're put together in a unique way. And that's what she's saying. She is a unique person because of all these multiple images that are collected together inside the person she is, just as we are all unique people. It's fantastic in the way she evokes this. There are no chapters in this book. I don't like books that are a continuous narrative. I normally like to have chapters to chunk it up and help with the reading. But it works here because it is a continuous stream of what life feels like. Fortunately, the paragraphs are separated by line spaces, so it is easier to read in that sense. But very much it's a continuous narrative. It isn't about my childhood, my adolescence. Although it does progress through time, you have a sense that it's kind of fluid and that the past is creeping back in, and sometimes the future is kind of looking at the present. So she's playing around with the tenses in that sense. There are so many moments in this book that are so get through to the heart, I think. You can tell I really, really loved this book. There's a section, just to take one example out of many, there's a section where she's talking about having a meal with her grown-up children. They're in their 40s or even 50s by now, and their partners and new partners and what have you. And they're repeating a kind of ritual, I suppose, really, of her having, when she was a child, having meals with her family, and then when her own family was growing, they would eat together, obviously. But now her children are adults, and she's elderly, and she just talks about how it's about this uniqueness of being a person again. How, although she knows her children very, very well, she doesn't know them in some senses. Aspects of their life are now ones that she doesn't see. And she reflects that was how it was with her and her parents. She thought she knew her parents so well because she saw them every day for long periods. But actually, as they disappear into time or fade into time, she realises there are whole aspects of what their lives were, all their millions of multiple impressions that she doesn't know about. And she captures this beautifully in her writing when she's talking about this meal table. She says, and here again, you've got a we. So the we she's talking about is possibly parents of grown-up kids. She says, with the satisfaction of the part-time nurturer, we watch them eat and take extra helpings of everything. Later, over champagne came the memories of TV shows, household products, ads and fashions from their childhood and adolescence, cagoules, iron-on knee patches, the Sani Crush electric toilet macerator, and so on. All these things I don't know about. As the objects of their common past resurfaced, they competed with each other to produce the best quote, a vast and futile remembering that made them seem like little boys again. And maybe a lot of us parents have recognised how we view our grown-up children. But just to continue with the kind of lovely writing, the afternoon light had shifted. The waves of excitement came at longer intervals. The suggestion of a game of Scrabble, which always made them argue, was sensibly dismissed. Immersed in the aroma of coffee and cigarettes, we savoured the sweetness of a ritual that had weighed so heavily upon us once that we'd wanted to flee it for good. Beyond marital breakdown, the death of grandparents, and a general growing apart, we'd ensured its continuity with a white tablecloth, silverware, and a joint of meat on this Sunday afternoon in the spring of 1995. As we watched and listened to these grown children, we wondered what bound us to each other. It wasn't blood or genes, only a present comprised of thousands of days spent together, words and gestures, meals, car journeys, a great deal of shared experience that left no conscious trace. I just think it's wonderful. I could say so much about this book. I feel I've barely touched the surface in making this video. I've tried to keep it compact, but it, like the book, it's very easy for it to sprawl, because after all, it is a whole life that she's talking about. And you realise that she's aware that, I mean, she's getting on a bit now, she's aware that, you know, she won't live forever. And she's wondering about what her life means or would look like after she's gone. Let me just finish with this last quote. So she's saying that when she's no longer here as the kind of container of all this stuff that makes a life, she says, everything will be erased in a second. The dictionary of words amassed between cradle and deathbed, eliminated. All there will be is silence and no words to say it. Nothing will come out of the open mouth, neither I nor me. Language will continue to put the world into words. In conversations around a holiday table, we will be nothing but a first name, increasingly faceless, until we vanish into the vast anonymity of a distant generation. It's great. It's great. I thoroughly recommend it.